Thanks for choosing to listen to this Late Night Linux Family podcast. We're only able to do this because of the people who support us. None of our shows are paywalled, but our Patreon supporters can get most episodes early and never hear any ads. Learn more at latenightlinux.com/support or support us by telling a friend or colleague about everything we do. Hello and welcome to episode 393 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 29th of June 2026. I'm Joe, and with me are Félim.
Evening.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Let's do some discoveries then. Will, quick drag.
We talked about accessibility when we were talking about the voice input on Ubuntu. And a very long time ago, like probably 10 years ago, I was speaking to Owen Kent. He got in touch with Ubuntu to say that he has physical disabilities, which mean that for him, using a mouse is very difficult. And what he wanted was the ability to click the mouse once and then move the mouse to where he wanted it and click the mouse button again and have it undo the click. So that would give him the ability to sort of toggle the mouse button on and off rather than having it be push to make. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll put it on the backlog. And it went on the backlog and never really got any action, never really progressed. And I think we spoke to GNOME about it and probably KDE may even need this as well. And so Owen has gone and built it himself. And that is Linux Quick Drag. Quite a simple GNOME app. You enable it, disable it, and you can configure it to set how long the mouse button has to be pressed for it to notice that you're pressing the button. So you could have it be like 2 or 3 seconds or something like that if you wanted it to be. And then it will hold the mouse button down until you let go, or until you click again, rather. And then it drops the button being pressed. And so I think that this is going to be very useful for people with physical disabilities, but also people with RSI, for example, where physically clicking the mouse button is painful. Then this is a potential solution to this.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about just the clicking of it. It's the click and drag. I can see how that could be quite painful in certain situations for certain people. And so, yeah, being able to just click, move, click, especially with a touchpad. I mean, if you think with a mouse, it's not as tricky potentially, but especially with touchpads, this could be a godsend for a lot of people.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the touchpad usage, but that's a really good example. On my ThinkPad, the touchpad is okay at best, but dragging is a pain in the backside. So, yeah, I might try that.
I've lost count of the number of times I've dragged on a touchpad and then got to the edge of the touchpad before I want to select everything. And if there's acceleration on the mouse pointer, you can go back slowly and then go quickly to the right, and then it'll go a bit further each time. But this would really solve that problem.
So Owen has got a roadmap on the GitHub page where he's listed out sort of some key features that he'd like, and there are still things to be done. So if you are an accessibility expert or you're just interested in helping out and you know a bit of GNOME, I think it is aiming at GNOME at the moment, and perhaps Wayland input, then, and you've got time to spare, then please get involved. Please get in touch with the project via their GitHub page and help improve it.
Graham, Nethack 5.
Nethack 5 has just been released, and I thought this was a really good time to remind everyone what actually an amazing game it is. I just looked, and it was first released in 1987.
Long before some of our listeners were even born.
Yeah. For many of us, it was like one of the only games you could kind of play with any meaningful depth on like a low-powered Linux terminal back in the 90s or the late 90s. And the thing is, surely most of us played it, but it's actually genuinely addictive. You know, I think it was a fork of Rogue, or then Hack and then Rogue. I don't know, but it has that gameplay that has become so popular now with the randomness every time you play it, and you never know how it's going to go. With an incredible balance of the algorithmic level design and the characters and the powers that you get as you walk through and explore, opening up the fog of war in all the rooms. I haven't tried it, but it's got a brand new tutorial because the onboarding was always really difficult. Loads of new visual additions, lots of different kind of level generators. And the story I remember from Nethack is that on the old magazines that I used to work for, Mike Saunders was absolutely addicted. So much so that everything that he ever wrote was late for about 6 months because he just couldn't stop playing Nethack.
I see it's available for MS-DOS, Windows, and Amiga.
Oh, I don't have one of those. When do they come out? Is there a wait list, a bit like for the Steam machine?
Yeah. But thankfully, it is also available for this thing called Linux, if you download the source code. So it's terminal-based then, Graham? Is that what you're trying to tell me here?
It is terminal-based, but there's loads of kind of graphical front ends that you don't have, that will not make it terminal-based if you want. But it's the real experience is on the terminal with characters, yeah.
And like, what's the point of it? Like, what you exploring and then what?
The point is you basically start with nothing in a room, and as you go around the room, you find things, you find doors and into corridors. The kind of map expands, and then the idea is that you find a trapdoor that takes you down to a level which is where everything gets slightly harder, and then you explore there. You kind of level up. It's a bit of an RPG in that way. You get better capabilities and weapons. You can buy things. All of this is kind of randomly generated, but it's pseudo-random because what's amazing is that it's all been tweaked over decades so that the randomness is incredibly playable and addictive. Every time you kind of play and then you explore and you see how low you can get, and that's what really drives you on to see if you can get it powerful enough and find the trapdoor down to the next level where you can adventure in a whole new level, see if you can level up again. The games can go on for a long, long time.
So what you're telling me is you start off with nothing and naked like Rust, okay, and then you have to level up like Pokemon. So it's like a cross between Rust and Pokemon.
Well, they're probably a cross of this, yes. Have you never played it?
I have never played it, no.
What type of planes or helicopters do you get to use in it? I mean,
there are bats.
Okay, you have my interest piqued.
Félim, check your bufferbloat.
This is second-hand information, but I was the one to prompt my brother to try something out. So there is obviously, the various speed test utilities about. There is actually one from LibreQuaz. It's bufferbloat.librequaz.com, and it's got a very great thing to check how badly things are being cached on your network. So you can run a test, and then it can say to you, okay, there's obviously some serious buffer bloat going on. So my brother's example was every time one of them was on a call for work and then somebody did a download, everything would go out of sync and laggy as hell. So there is a great way to test this on your system. And I give an example of some documentation, say from OpenSense, on how to fix this. Like, it can be quite complicated how it goes on. But yeah, for people out there who are maybe stuck working at home and struggling to try and get their internet to work properly, this guide should hopefully help.
Well, I've discovered something that is not very Linuxy, to be honest, but Windows 10 Consumer Extended Security Updates has been extended. So Windows 10 continues to limp on. It was supposed to end in October this year, but now they have quietly updated the website, the web page about this, to just bump it another year. So you can pay for this, or if you're in the EU, because of the faceless bureaucrats there, they forced Microsoft to give this away for free. And apparently the person at Microsoft who was in charge of implementing this for the EU didn't get the Brexit memo, so you can do this for free in the UK. You have to jump through a bunch of hoops and sign into a Microsoft account, but you can actually sign back out again after you've enabled it. There was an Explaining Computers video about this about a year ago. Anyway, I did that for my dad and just kicked the can down the road because I think his is like a 5th or 6th gen i5 or whatever. So it's never going to get official Windows 11, and I'm not hacking it on there. And he does need Windows 11 for his printer, which he bought without my advice. So don't at me. I set him up with a printer that would work with Linux, and then anyway, whatever. So he's stuck on Windows 10. And so this is quite the conundrum for me now, because I had already bought him an 11th gen ThinkPad, an L14 Gen 2, I think it is. And then a week later, I see this news. So now I don't know what to do. I need to talk to him and ask him, do you want something faster and different, or do you want something slow and the same for another year, and then we'll deal with it in a year? But it's just interesting to me that Microsoft have done this. I mean, they were doing these updates anyway for people who were paying and certain other versions of it. So it's not like a big deal for them. But for them to give it away, I mean, I'm hoping they're going to give it away for free to the EU people and the UK people like me or my dad. But who knows?
Do you know why this actually happened?
Why?
Because I have a test VM that is Windows 10 and it couldn't upgrade to Windows 11 because I didn't set it up with UEFI and Secure Boot and a fake TPM and all that, and eventually got around to doing that last week.
So they thought, I know, fuck you, Félim.
And that is exactly what happened. The fella in the van who sits outside my window waved at me, went, fuck you, dick, and then drove off. And then this is what happened. Hours later. Shower bastards. Do you know what's also funny? I can't run WSL in my Windows 11 VM because it says I can't do nested VMs. And I looked at it, I went, I'm sure I could fix this, but I can't give a shite, even though it annoys me.
Well, I've now got this conundrum probably, and now I've got, oh no, I've ended up with an 11th gen ThinkPad for the stack. What a shame. But no, I probably will give it to him sooner rather than later.
Microsoft's European headquarters is literally 20 minutes down the road from me. I'll nip in there and tell them the UK is not part of the EU, so we'll sort that out. It'll be broken within minutes.
Yeah, well, I am kind of waiting for it to break. In fact, I haven't looked at it for a few months. It probably is already broken already, so I need to go over and look at it. But this is kind of, I don't know, it's good news for e-waste, but it's also kind of bad news for Linux, isn't it? Because that machine could be running Linux now, but instead it's going to just run Windows 10 for another year probably. But then, would it really have been running Linux, or would it be in fucking landfill? I don't know. The 8 gigs of RAM in it are probably worth enough to stop it going to landfill.
You can have an extension on your house with that.
Yeah, exactly. Put a new bathroom in. I mean, jokes aside, this is my read of the situation, that machine is going to be all right. If you know better, please do let me know. show@latelightlinux.com. Félim, you've got something of a shower thought.
Yeah, so it kind of mixes in with the various things we've heard from those teenage people who apparently are now buying CDs and records to have the physical object.
Artifacts, we called them, didn't we?
Artifacts, sorry. Yes, you're correct. Versus people going out and spending money on ridiculously overpriced phones and laptops from various big manufacturers. And then it comes down to us with our favorite OS, and it costs nothing. Yet we value it. And I guess the question I had was, why do we value something that's free when other people say, oh, if it's free, it's not worth anything, or it's not very good?
Well, the classic joke about Linux is it's only free if your time is worthless, which does have kind of a, I don't know, bit of truth in it.
That's a throwaway one, though. It's like, obviously, anything that you put effort into costs you something in time and, well, effort. But that's pretty much everything that we have. If you're doing it in work-wise, you know, a job where you even support Windows stuff, none of that is doing it magically for itself. You have to put effort into all of them. So what do we say to other people? We say, you should value this thing more than the thing that you pay money for.
I think this is where a lot of the Ubuntu hate came from originally, was because all of these greybeards had been compiling their own kernels and fixing bugs in the software, and now suddenly a distro came along where you didn't have to do all of that stuff, and that was too easy. You know, that was too free, and so there was no barrier to entry, and that's why people hated on it.
So my take on this, I think we kind of hinted at, but I don't think it is free. We've talked about this many times in the past, but the fact that you can change anything, you kind of own the OS in a way, is why we use Linux and open source. But with that, I've always felt genuinely comes a responsibility. I am not purely a consumer of these things. I actually want to take responsibility for ensuring it continues and that other people know of its existence. And that's kind of been the price for me that I'm more than happy to pay, even if it doesn't do any good. But that to me is I become a participant in it rather than a passive consumer of it. And that's, for me, the big difference.
How would you sway that to somebody, though, who is not necessarily the same level of technical that we are, or even anyway technical, but we want them to use Linux because we think, we know in our hearts that for them, that it'll solve a lot of their problems. They won't have the virus problems. They won't have the forced upgrades of processors, whatever that you get in Windows. And we know that they only do browsing and, basic web stuff, whatever. How do we say that to them that is actually worthwhile?
Well, I think a contribution can be tiny or minuscule. And I think by choosing to use an operating system like Linux, it's like choosing to use a browser like Firefox. You lend your support just by using it, and you're making it harder to ignore as an alternative. And I think that's completely fine. I mean, there's cost for them in terms of presumably learning curve and support and the fear that comes with trying something new. So neither is it free for them. But hopefully the payoff for them and for us is that there's more of us and we can have more of an impact.
Okay, so a show of hands, who would say that a use of the technology is a contribution? Because I remember there was a bit of snobbery about this in the maybe decade past or whatever, where it was like, you're only a contributor if you're actually contributing. Using is not contributing. But I think realistically, I would agree that it is a contributing factor. Would you use?
I think that just plain using is a bit of a stretch to be a contributor. If you're using it and you're telling people about it, or you're helping your parents whose machine you installed it on by fixing things, or I don't know, you're an active user who is sharing the good word, I think that's contributing. I think that the next step up from there is answering questions on forums and that kind of thing.
What about if you are a user who actively enables telemetry where possible? Is that contributing? I suppose it is a bit.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's doing the sort of minimal amount that you possibly can, really, to contribute.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm talking about people that, they probably wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't even know what their browser was if you asked them half the time. But they might be equally involved or want to be involved in something like this, but just genuinely don't have the skills to do it. And that's why I think actually it's funny that the submitting of sort of usage information is an actual quite handy way for them to actually contribute, I suppose. I hadn't even thought of that.
Well, yeah, if you've got 1 million people who've got an old laptop with the, 1360 whatever by 768 resolution, and they submit to a project like Ubuntu that they're using that, what we consider comically low resolution, that is actually really useful data. But your initial question, Félim, gets at this, the heart of the kind of the problem with selling open source and Linux, like the fact that there is no cost there financially, and therefore how can it have any value? I think that was more of a problem when it actually cost money to upgrade the likes of Windows or Mac OS, whereas now that seems a bit antiquated to me, the idea of paying for an operating system. I mean, ultimately, if you buy a laptop, you are paying a Windows tax for it. And, let's not talk about the ridiculous prices that Apple charge and have put up recently. But, upgrading a version of macOS or iOS or Android, there's no sense of paying for it. Not like with Windows, you used to go and buy the fucking CDs or whatever to upgrade to a new version. But that is a bit of an outdated concept. So I don't think that is ultimately that much of a problem. Like if you consider it just updates, you're updating to Linux almost. That's probably how I would try and sell it to someone.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Do we want to expand this conversation out into other areas of low cost, low value, like downloading movies off the internet?
Who does that? None of us. So we can't talk about that, surely. None of us have any experience of it.
I'm too busy stealing policemen's helmets and doing a poo in them.
I've got a very close friend who does.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I have as well, actually. And I've spoken to him in depth about it.
He's always trying to lend me his VHSs, but I just don't want to.
They told me that when they were very poor, piracy was the only option for some of the things that they felt excluded from. And then when they got an income, they were more than happy to pay subscriptions to access this. But in recent years, it's become deeply frustrating for them to access the content without subscribing to every service. And even then, they've had movies they've previously licensed from a service taken away from their library. And so they've gone back quite a lot to downloading movies again. I said, that's probably breaking all kinds of copyright law, but they seem to persist.
Well, my friend told me exactly the same thing, Graham. They said, it's one thing to be sharing passwords and everything, but then that got cracked down on. So they were literally forced back to getting TV shows and movies that way. And I said to them, that doesn't sound right to me. But they said, it'll be fine.
Do your friends have any opinions about the general poor quality and lack of new stories coming out of Hollywood, for example, at the moment? The fact that everything is just a rehash of a movie, a remake of a movie that's already been made, and people aren't really taking risks anymore because the studios would rather make a cheap remake that they know is going to sell X than take a gamble effectively on something that they don't know about. And so the value of these 2-star movies, or even worse than that, is actually very, very low and not worth paying for.
I think once they start a series, they should bloody finish it, and that means go back and finish the fucking Wheel of Time, you shower bastards. You big bald-haired prick. Fucking hell.
Didn't they finish The Expanse before it was properly concluded as well?
What? I haven't watched 3 seasons of that. Don't tell me things like that. Jesus.
I don't know. I only watched a couple of episodes of it and decided it was boring space politics.
It isn't. It gets really good.
I think you have a point though, Will, that the value just isn't really there. It's just slop, for want of a better word, isn't it? They're just churning this shit out because there's so many streaming services. And even the big Hollywood movies, like apparently the Spielberg one, Disclosure Day, apparently that's a real disappointment.
Mm.
But, Will said, I think the most important word there, which was risk for the companies involved. We are actually rewarding those companies by watching the stuff that they make and not taking risks on the things that are perhaps harder to watch or require more investment from us intellectually, if that's what it's about. Because I'm sure, just like the Daily Mail, they're just responding to whatever makes them popular, and they've just gone down that route. I'm sure there are lots of filmmakers who would much rather make interesting and original content, but are frustrated by the fact that companies are only prepared to risk on a well-established brand.
Well, there's 2 movies that have come out this summer that have been really, really popular by all accounts, that are very much not just franchise and remake bullshit. Obsession and Backrooms.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Masters of the Universe. Okay, right, not that then.
Yeah, Masters of the Universe.
Hey,
which
apparently that is meant to be actually quite good.
Really? I've not.
Apparently
not heard that.
so.
We're getting into proper Ask the Host territory here, but I think they do take some risks. But it's, only cheap stuff. I mean, remember Blair Witch? That was, that cost tens of thousands of dollars to make, I think, and then just made millions. And so, I suppose horror generally has got a rich tradition of being fairly cheap to make, and you get the odd just explosive hit that goes viral. So, I think you're probably more likely to get stuff in that genre, but you're right. I mean, it is just slop, basically, the shit that's in the cinema and on streaming services. And yeah, the value is not there. So no wonder our friends are just, torrenting it or getting off Usenet or whatever.
Torrent? I don't understand what that means, but okay.
No, it's a word my friend uses. I've never really looked into it.
I thought it was to rent.
Yeah. He goes to the shop to rent it. Yeah.
Yeah, an amazing shock to know this would be like a capitalism fucking ruins everything. Line must go diagonally upwards. It's like, fuck's sake.
I don't know how we got onto this from Linux being free, but I suppose, yeah, it's all about value propositions, isn't it? Like, even though Linux is free, the value of it is so much more than the 20 quid it costs to go and see fucking Masters of the Universe, isn't it? Like, if you gave that 20 quid, if everyone who went to see Masters of the Universe gave 20 quid to a distro or an open source project, I think the world would be in a better place.
You have the power. Just saying. Sorry.
I actually quite like the one from the late 80s.
Dolph Lundgren.
Courtney Cox is in it.
Yeah. Oh dear.
But it's only because I was a kid.
I think that's a good way of bringing it all back, actually, Joe. I think talking about the challenge, Linux is a challenge. open source is more of a challenge, and that you get what you put into it. And maybe you just can't say that of a lot of modern content. Although, to be fair, I have watched some great stuff over the last few years as well.
What, round your mate's house?
I mean, personally, I'm really happy to pay for something if I get to keep it and I've got some kind of assurance about its quality and availability. There's lots of stuff that I find really, really difficult to find. Just, looking for interesting movies that have maybe not been made in the US or the UK. It's impossible. And I'd much rather be able to spend a modest amount of money on something and have it and know it and keep it.
There was a story this week about how people bought movies on their PlayStation, and because licensing, it's going to be removed from their PlayStation against their wishes. They paid actual money for this stuff, and it's being taken away from them.
Yeah, that has happened to me, specifically on the PlayStation as well. And the movie was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That I got for the
classic.
kids, a long time ago. And it really annoyed me. Sat down one day, they wanted to watch it. We always had to skip the line at the beginning because that's the most scary part for them. But after that, they used to really enjoy it.
It's no Mary Poppins, is it? Well, I don't know where we were even going with this discussion, but I had fun.
My work here is done.
Yes, well done, Félim. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when it'll probably be news and stuff. The frame will be out and we'll all have bought one. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Félim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.